Hello and welcome to the introduction to the Renovo Video Manager. This particular tutorial is going to be on how to create a new reservation within Renovo. And the basic reservation setup starts off by clicking on the MCU reservation link. And I'm going to just quickly step through this process to give you an overview of how things work. As you can see, by clicking in the title box, it brings up a list of past titles that I've used. So it makes it pretty convenient when you're reconfiguring an event that occurs over and over again. So for this particular test, I'm simply going to name mine test 1. And as you can see, there's drop-down arrows for additional information for description, the semester, the course type, and there's also event parameters. And in my daily work, I don't ever use any of these. All I need is just the title to start with. And you click on Next. And here's where you can put in the start date for the event. Here is a little calendar option. So if you click on the calendar option, it's really handy that it does show you a 6-month time frame, so you don't have to click the arrows 1 month to get through 1 month at a time. So for this particular event, let's say we want to start it on October 29th, and you have to click OK. If you do not click OK and you click outside the box, and this one that goes away, you'll notice the date has not changed. It's still on today's date. So let's open it back up, click on the 29th, click on OK, and boom, there's 29th. And if for some reason, if you're reusing an old reservation, if you're copying an old reservation, you can click on the date, the calendar icon, and click on today, and it will set it for today's date automatically, but you still have to click OK. So let's go back up and reset it to 29th, even though it doesn't really matter. It can be any date since it's just a test conference. And here's where you set the start time and end time and the duration. Now the key thing to remember about doing the start time and end time is to make sure that the duration is updated. If the duration doesn't update when you click on the next tab, then your conference time is not going to be set properly. So like for example, if I have it set for 12:05 p.m. and I change the end time to 1:17 p.m., you'll notice that the duration time has changed. When you're reusing old conferences, if you're copying an old conference, oftentimes you'll want to use the time for start and end the same, and even though you've changed the date, but if you do not change the time and actually click in the box, this duration time will not change. It'll be set for whatever the default time is in the box. So I've made that mistake in the past where I will change the date, but I will not actually click in one of these boxes for the time. You don't have to change the times, but you must click inside the boxes in order to get the duration time to update to the correct amount of time. And the second drop-down box here is generate recurrence. And in this case, I just want one, but if I wanted more than one occurrence, I can click on daily, weekly, monthly, and you simply change the number of occurrences. But normally when I have multiple events, I know the end dates, like for example, a school semester. So I can click on end by, and if I wanted to run from to the end of October, or let me increase this a bit since I did start it on the 29th up here. So I wanted to show you multiple recurrences. So let's make it November the 30th. And right now it's set for daily. So if I were to click generate, it would show an occurrence of the conference every single day from starting on the 29th going to November the 30th. And if I wanted to do it weekly, where I can select individual days. So all of my classes run Monday through Friday. and I want to skip Saturdays and Sundays because there's no reason to join a conference and generate a connection when there's no one here. It doesn't really hurt my system, but it will when I record the events, and I record almost every single event for future use, then it would be filling up my my VCRs with blank hours of conferences, and I have to keep careful watch on all my conferences because I can only record up to 1,000, and I started having to purge conferences from the VCRs. So your other option is to go monthly. So you have your options here where you can choose the first, second, third, fourth, last Monday, each day of the week. But I've never had conferences set for monthly. They're always weekly, and they're always Monday through Friday, or a combination of like Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursdays, or Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays. So now that I've got this set up to go for 5 days a week for approximately 1 month, I click on Generate. If you only need the event for one-time use, there's no use setting up the generate occurrence, you can just click on Add Date, and Add Date will add the single event to it. And let me go back and redo that so I can show you exactly what I mean. I'm going to delete all those occurrences. And if I were to put this back to the default setting of end after one occurrence, all I do is click on Add Date. Now, if you only want to do it for 1 day, there's no reason to use this drop-down box at all. You simply put in the date, put in the time, put in the end time, and click on Add Date. And boom, there it is. If you're going to generate recurrences, I click on End By, choose my ending date, and as you can see, my check boxes are still there from when I set them earlier. Now, if I clicked on Generate as it is now, it is going to create 2 conferences on the 29th. So there's going to be one of them will be in conflict. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that existing one. And now I'm going to click Generate. And as you can see, it generated the 29th again, and all the way through 11/29. Now, if for some reason you put in the wrong times, and say you need to start this at 12:25 instead of 12:05, you simply change the time up here. It can be any of these times that you want. If you want to switch it to AM, or change the end time up here from 1 to 2 p.m. or 2:17 p.m. You can see the duration has been modified, and without having to delete these, you can simply click on Modify Dates and Times, and every one of these that has been checked will be modified. So you can see that the start time is now 12:05, the end time is 1:17. Click on Modify, and the time has been changed to 12:25 and to 2:17. And you can go back if you find that you have made Saturdays and Sundays on here. You can go back and click on the minus sign. It will unselect everything and then manually go in there and check off the ones if you need to delete them, and click on Delete. And they're gone. And after you've got your days and times in place, click on Next. And this brings up the window where you add rooms to your conference. And for example, if I wanted to add Westbrook High School, and I wanted to add Bridge City, and I wanted to add an IPVCR, which is a recording device, you can just type in part of the name and search, and it will bring them up. And as you can see, I have a bunch of IPVCRs. I have IPVCR 1 through 10, and I have IPVCR 2, 1 through 5. Now what you don't see on here are the off-network IPVCRs that I built, because we were having some issues with the way Renovo was connecting these on-network rooms to our Codium bridges. So as a workaround, temporarily, I have built off-network rooms for the IPVCRs. And the only way to see those is to uncheck favorites. and reorder these. And once I get them ordered properly, you will see now that I have off-network IPVCRs. And currently, these are the only ones that are working properly for me. So if I were to use these, it would cause issues when the Codian received the connection information. So mainly on the IPVCR1s are used on my Codian 1, and IPVCR2s are used on Codian 2. So I'm going to build this on Codian 1, and it doesn't really matter which ones I use. They will still connect and they will still record, whether I'm using IPVCR2 on Codian 1 or IPVCR1 on Codian 2. It does not matter. They will still connect. It's just a matter of keeping things organized. So I'm just going to check 1.7 just because it was handy, and click on Next. And this is the final page where you do your Codian settings setup. It's called the MCU setup, but our brand is Codian, so it's a Codian MCU. And this first box says switch MCU. So if it says switch to MCU2, that means by default this event is going to be sent to the Codian 1 MCU. So if I want to switch it over there, click on Move, and now you can see that it's now on Codian MCU2, and it will let you switch it back to MCU if you want to. So I'm going to move back to 1. And it has default templates set up. We only have a couple set up, and this is the 384 default template, which sets all the rooms to automatically connect at 384 kilobits. And since our rooms at different locations have different internet speeds, I have stopped using that 384. I try to give each room as much speed as it can handle and give it the best quality they can get. And if for some reason you have a really big event, like sometimes I'll have events where I'll have 12, 15, 16, 17 different remote connections, I will be over capacity on my MCU. And over here, based on the number of rooms that I've selected and the other rooms that are being used concurrently at the same time, this will give you a load of how much of your capacity is being used on the particular MCU. Like for example, I'm on MCU 1. Alrighty, sorry about that. I had to answer the phone real quick. But let's get back to where I was. Cascading the conferences across multiple MCUs. Like I said, if you have a conference with quite a few connections or endpoints, participants as they're called in here, we call them endpoints on the Codian. This will tell you how much of a load is being placed on that particular Codian. Like MCU1 has a total of 25% utilization based on what's already been scheduled and what I'm trying to schedule together. So sometimes if it gets close to 90, 95%, I do have to cascade this conference across to the other MCU. And all you do is click on Cascade, and you will now see that there are 2 MCUs listed down here. And it will let you set up the rooms on both MCUs. Like if I have 20 rooms here in the main page where they're all set for, these are all set for MCU1. If I want to move them to MCU2, just click on Move, and now that room has been moved down to MCU2 starting right here. Well, get that highlighted a little better. MCU2, and it will tell you the total utilization on MCU2 based on your current configuration and what's currently scheduled. So I have had to do this a few times in the past. It's pretty easy to do. It's all automatic, and the system does all the work for you. You simply tell it which ones you want to move to which MCU, you put in their speeds, and you're done. So I'm going to move this back to MCU1 because I don't need to cascade this. And I'm going to remove that MCU from the conference. So I go back to the default screen. Now, some of the things I do set up every time is the default conference layout. So right now it's set for 2 by 2, which means it looks like this, where you have 2 verticals and 2 horizontals. And most people do not like that. Some teachers do like this layout so they can see all their classrooms on the far end. But if you're doing a conference where they're doing PowerPoint presentations or any type of overhead projections that need to be seen by the far ends, then this screen is usually way, way too small for people to be able to read the text on the screen. So I always set mine up for a 1 by 1. And if you're going to be recording it, you need to choose a IPVCR folder. We have 4 or 5 folders set up depending on whether we're recording Spanish classes or we're recording different workshops. And we do have a default folder where it can all fall into. If I forget to set a folder, there is a default folder, but I have to go back in there later and separate the videos into their own categories. So since this is the test, I'm just going to use the IPVCR1 folder, TETN. And as you can see, we have 2 IPVCRs, so I can choose IPVCR2 if I want to. But as you can see, these are IPVCR2 is mainly used for college credit courses and Spanish classes. And my IPVCR1 is mainly used for the TETNs and some of the college level courses. But this is my main folder for IPVCR1. And you can set the floor and chair control so that people can control each other's endpoints. I do not allow that most of the time. And if you're going to be setting up a course where people are calling in with their iPad, or if they're calling in from a remote computer, or if another region center is calling in, this is where you set up the numeric ID. As I showed in the introduction page, setting up the numeric ID range on the bridges, I have set mine to a 4-digit code. And if I were to put a 5-digit code in here, it would truncate it down to 4 digits. So most of my courses, I do like to start them with a 5. So as you can see, like 5001, 5003, 5004, these numbers can be reused over and over again. You just cannot use the same number on 2 events at the same time on the same MCU. So you'll get an error if this number is already being used by another event on MCU1. And if this was going to be done on MCU2, it would be the same situation. If there's an event happening anytime during this particular event's time frame, and I try to use a duplicate numeric ID or party number, then I'm going to get an error code. So I'm going to put in 5001. And at the bottom here for participants, I set the speed rate for the classrooms. And as you can see, we have a variety of speeds. We do have a gigabit connection. So I'm going to set my default connection rate at 1 megabit. It won't force the far end connections to connect at that speed, but it will try to, and it will go down from there. So if I were to set this at 384, but there's schools like Westbrook High School, if they have a T1 line and can actually connect at 1.5 megabits, they won't be able to. It'll connect at 384 or less. So we try to give them as much bandwidth as possible since we've upgraded our broadband. So it will try to connect at 1 megabits, and if it has a lower connection speed, then it will just throttle itself down. And that is the main part for the MCU tab, which is usually, this is one of the most important tabs. Just remember to check the right code in, because we do spread our events across 2 code-ins. We try to put Spanish classes on one code-in, and we try to put workshops on the other code-in, just as a way of managing things. And you have to check your conference layout. If this little checkbox is checked, it's going to use the default layout, which in this case is 2 by 2, and it does cause problems for viewing for some people. And if you're recording it, you need to choose the right IPVCR. And if someone is dialing in remotely to watch the conferences, then they will need this numeric ID when they dial in. It has no real purpose if you're dialing out. It doesn't come into play. And the final thing is to set your room bit rate. And all rooms are set for standby and at 1 megabit per second. Now you do have some other room standby options, which is dial out, but since none of the other rooms are going to be dialing out, we put it on room standby. And you click finish. And as you can see, they are all in the requested state. And using the filter on the side here, I have mine set up to show if I have any conflicts or if I've had anything canceled in here. So you can go back into this event later on and cancel, remove, or change the room settings or pretty much anything you want to with it, but you will have to revalidate all the conferences. So let's click on validate. And until this happens, these rooms have been created, they just have not been saved to the Codian. So they will not connect until they've been validated. And you can see our little percentage marker here. And it will take a few minutes. It takes about 5 minutes for this system to do its process for validating the conferences. And I'm going to pause this until it has finished. And we are done. Once it hits the little progress meter hit 100%, it automatically switched over to this compose email screen. And if in the system, you can configure the rooms so that they are owned by certain people. So when the process is completed, it will generate these emails to send out to the owners of the rooms so they know that the rooms are in use. Since there's only 3 of us that actually use this system, there's no need to send out these emails because there's no real conflicts with rooms being in use since we all know what's going on. But if you have a whole bunch of users, this is just a handy system to let all these users know, these rooms are in use, don't schedule them. So I'm going to click on discard to get rid of all of them. And as you can see, all the conferences have been validated. And I'm going to demonstrate what it looks like if a reservation gets canceled for some reason. If I didn't want to have one on the 31st, you can click on cancel here and it will get rid of this one. Or you can check off multiple ones. And instead of having to click cancel on each one of these, you can click on the little X here and you have a choice. You cancel the selected conferences or cancel the whole thing. And since I only wanted these 5 canceled, I'm going to click on cancel selected conferences. And it will take a minute for it to cancel these. And as you can see, I have my default conference filter set up. So when it does finish the cancellation, they will not show up because I don't have the cancel button checked. And let me pause this for a second. And it has completed the cancellation process and generated more emails to send out to let people know that the rooms are now free for use. And let me cancel those out. And as you can see, the 5 that I checked off are now gone. But if I were to click on the cancel button or the checkbox, you can now see those were canceled. And if you want to, you can go back in, check them off again, and revalidate them. And this time I'm going to leave the screen going so that you can see it switch from this screen to the email screen once it has completed its process. And there it goes. It has now completed the validation process. And as you can see, the 5 I had checked off are now back to being dark blue. They're validated and ready to send. So that is pretty much it for creating and validating a new reservation